New format, new tournaments, and new tech. There is quite a lot to talk about when it comes to the Overwatch League now that we're only a few months away from the start of Season 4. In today's video, we have an exclusive interview with Sean Miller from the Overwatch League to dive deeper into what's to come. But before that, here's a quick rundown of the main changes this season. In 2021, the league will again be split into two divisions, but this time known as East and West, with teams playing in regular season regional qualifier matches to determine seeding in 4 standalone tournaments. The tournaments will feature top teams from both regions competing in one bracket, which means we will see more cross-regional play, something that was missing for most of 2020. One of the biggest announcements is the new 8 to 12 team split between East and West in 2021. While most teams will be staying in the same region as last season, the notable changes will be Spitfire going to the West, while both the Philadelphia Fusion and, yes that's right, the LA Valiant will be joining East this year. And now, without further ado, onto the interview.
Actually, first of all, can you tell me a little bit about yourself and your role with Blizzard in the league?
For sure. So Sean Miller, Senior Manager of Product Strategy and Franchise Operations. So the work I do on the league is primarily around, the product, what the season looks like, format, a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about today. And then I also have a big part of my role is helping the teams in the league, with their operations and being kind of a voice of support for them within the league.
Can you briefly explain to me the change and distinction between Pacific and Atlantic to East and West?
East and West, sure. So the two teams, right? The regions that will be competing next year will be both in the Eastern Western region, and the East will have teams in China and Korea, and the West will be in NA and the EU. No real reason behind renaming them between Pacific and Atlantic, other than they're not technically those divisions, and we'll reveal more, on Thursday with the actual announcement of what teams are where. But those two regions will be, the primary competition circuits in 2021.
All right, fair enough. Can you tell me just a little bit more about the new league format this season and what some of the biggest changes are?
Yeah, so I think one of the coolest things about 2020 was learning about and being flexible with our format and adapting for online play. And one of those things that we learned was that tournaments are awesome, and people like them, fans, players like them, teams like them, and so that was one of our big takeaways is let's do that again for 2021. And I think that is at a baseline very exciting, but I think what's even cooler is for 2021, the thing that we'll be able to do or hope to do, plan to do, is have global competition for each of those tournaments. So you remember in 2020, each of the tournaments were regional. We had the 2 circuits, and then it all culminated in a postseason in Korea. We hope to have all 4 of our tournaments next year to be global, and this is made possible through the minimum latency tool, which I think was in the press release, and happy to go into detail there. But I think that's probably the one thing is having global competition for all of our tournaments is really exciting to me.
Excellent. So you mentioned a couple of the things that you learned last season, but what were some of the more logistical lessons that were learned, and how are those affecting your approach to this season in terms of how to run a league online?
We really had to do a lot of testing and learning of whether online matches were even fair and feasible, right? Last year we kind of had to learn on the fly in many ways, right? We had to make sure things were fair, that things worked properly, that the ping was appropriate for players around the world. Whereas I think for 2021, we've learned a lot of those lessons, and we can now plan for them much more in advance. And so the minimum latency tool, for example, is I think one good example of that is by being able to plan ahead and know that we're going to have online matches next year, we can say, well, what was a pain point in 2020, which was latency in some cases, and I'm happy to kind of explain how all this works because I know it's probably new to a lot of people, but now we can really pinpoint those problems and solve for them in a much more planned way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And I think in this next question, we'll get a little bit more into the nitty gritty on that. So yeah, in 2020, we were supposed to have the full rollout of homestands, but due to the global health crisis, obviously the league had to be split into more like isolated regions. And unfortunately, we weren't able to see cross-regional play until grand finals. Could you describe the kind of like nuances of these improvements, like the minimum latency tool that's been necessary to run the league remotely?
Sure. So if I were to play you, let's say you're in New York, and I was to play a game of Overwatch with you, and I'm in LA. Ideally, we find the exact midpoint in the United States between New York and LA, and we have the exact same latency, and it's completely fair and it works out, right? Well, unfortunately, that's not how it works. There has to be a physical server between two locations where competition is happening. And so the solution was to say, well, if the server is in, let's say, Ohio, you're in New York, your ping is going to be a little bit better than mine. And so to make it fair, and what this minimum latency tool does is it says, well, if mine is the higher one at 50 milliseconds, say, but you're only at 20, well, we can set an artificial level that says we're both playing it at 50 milliseconds now, so it's completely fair. And so last year, you know, when the Gladiators were playing Philadelphia, for example, it wasn't, you know, a huge deal because across the states and there was no noticeable kind of lag there. But where it does really matter is this global competition. And so by having this minimum latency setting, it's going to enable the top NA teams to travel to Hawaii and be able to play, you know, across the ocean there and have that global competition happen. Like that's why global competition can happen in a fair way.
You know, obviously before this, Contenders was also already kind of in a remote league situation. Are there any plans to utilize these innovations to help boost the Tier 2 scene as well?
Definitely. So we tested this in a lot of places, and actually now that it's up and running, it's actually in the game client itself. So you can go into a custom game today and set a minimum ping to make it fair for your lobby, which is pretty cool. The Contenders Gauntlet that just got done here in December was also played using this feature. One example was Australia. Teams in Australia played teams in Korea, which obviously very far apart, and they were able to use this tool, and the feedback was universally positive. All the players and teams, you know, at a minimum, were just very appreciative that everything was fair, and it really put them on a level playing field with their opponent. And so 100%, like, this is a feature that the development team has been super supportive of and wanted in the game as well. And so we've been able to work closely with them. Last point I'll make there is that we did test this with Overwatch League teams as well, and you know, just like everything we do at the league, we're iterating with teams, and they've been able to provide feedback and kind of their input on what levels are acceptable and what aren't, and so that's been good. It's been a lot of fun actually to kind of go through the process.
Can you speak much to the broadcast relationship with YouTube and how that's developing?
Sure. So YouTube, you know, at a base level, they've been a great partner for us, and they're looking at doing quite a few things next year to improve the kind of level up their game, as well as, you know, what we're doing. And a couple of things there. First is the quality of the matches, making sure that the pixels are as high as they can possibly be in every single one of our matches, and fans can enjoy it in the clearest quality. Another thing that they're working on is, you know, viewership incentives, and I think that there's going to be more details to share there, but I can just say that they're working on viewership incentives and making those more integrated. Those are a couple of the big things. A couple of other stuff they're working on I would love to share more, but I think that's going to have to come at a later time.
Are there any other like big changes that you want to kind of touch on before we kind of wrap this up?
the last thing that's probably worth touching on is just our digital fan experiences are going to get an upgrade this year. Things like spoiler-free view modes, and this is really cool. But I think one of the things that we saw in 2020 was, right, for fans in NA, the Asia matches were played at like 2 a.m. And you get onto the Overwatch League website or the app and be like, oh, well, Guangzhou won, and the hype is kind of removed. But what we're working on now is a kind of a modification to the website where fans will be able to have a spoiler-free experience, and if they kind of want to watch the Guangzhou versus Shanghai match like it was happening in real time and feel all the excitement there, then they'll be able to do that. So I'm excited for that, because I was one of the things that I was trying to like navigate myself last season so that I wouldn't spoil things myself. I think that's probably the last thing I'll bring up. We'll announce more details on more specific competition related details later in the season, such as hero pools, how the tournaments will be structured, how the postseason will look like. So all that's coming. We just wanted to make sure that we get kind of these first order problems out with how the season looks, that it'll start in April, all that, and we'll have more to share in the coming weeks on more of the competition stuff. So
all right, sounds good. So any final comments to the community going into 2021? What fans should be excited about specifically? You kind of mentioned the enhanced fan experience.
Yeah, so I think those experiences, a lot of the YouTube improvements, get hyped for those, and I mean, me as a fan and less of an employee, like I am just excited about a lot of these storylines from the teams. Like the Shock are looking for their three-peat. I think that the Dallas Fuel, like having picked up a pretty all-star roster and being able to see what they're going to be able to do with that, I'm excited. And like the Gladiators, right? They picked up some really veteran players that are amazing. Getting Moth, I'm excited to see what he does over there. And so, a long way of me saying that like there's a lot going on with the league, but at the same time there's a lot going on with the teams, and they're making a lot of moves, and it's going to be a fun season.
All right. Well, hey, Sean, thanks so much. It was a pleasure meeting you, and we really appreciate the info.
Thanks, Adam.